Hello and welcome to The Perspective. I'm your host Rafiq Bal, and in today's show we'll be deliberating on a very serious topic. Of course, Pakistan's efforts against terrorism and of course Pakistan-Afghanistan ties as well. We'll be deliberating on the overall security situation in the region. Just a few days ago, the DG IPRI, Lieutenant General Ahmed Chaudhry addressed a press briefing regarding Pakistan's counter-terrorism efforts and of course the security threat emanating from Afghan soil. The Foreign Office spokesperson Mumtaz Zahra Baloch also emphasized on cooperation between both the sides to resolve this issue, and of course in regards to that, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, he also termed TTP's activities as a red line and called it unacceptable. Just a matter of fact, if we talk about the security situation, yesterday Pakistan security forces thwarted an attempt of 20 to 25 terrorists trying to infiltrate into Pakistan from the Afghanistan border through the Taliban border post. Of course, the security forces, they effectively responded and thwarted this attempt. However, the militants, upon their failure, they resorted to unprovoked heavy weapon firing upon the Pakistan's border post. Despite these repeated calls by Pakistan upon the interim Afghan authorities, no sincere effort as of yet has been seen or been made by the Afghan Taliban regime to curb this menace of terrorism that is not only affecting Afghanistan itself as well, but affecting Pakistan in particular and the region at large, which is now focusing on connectivity within the Central Asian states and of course a greater project of connectivity within the wider region. We'll be deliberating on all the aspects regarding Pakistan-Afghanistan ties in the context of the security issue that is prevailing in the region and how it is hampering the region's success and prosperity. In the studios, we've been joined by Mr. Jauhar Saleem, who is the president of IRS, the Institute of Regional Studies, and former Foreign Secretary. We've also been joined on Skype by Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, who is a former ambassador, and Brigadier Raashid Wali Janjua, who is Director Research at IPRI and a senior analyst. I'd like to thank you all for your time in being part of the conversation. We'll begin from Mr. Jauhar in the studios. Of course, when we talk about the security situation, when we talk about Pakistan in particular, of course, the government is putting in a lot of effort for economic revitalization, but we know economic prosperity goes hand in hand with a stable, secure environment. When we talk about calling on the Afghan side to, of course, curb this issue, there's been repeated calls, but there's no sincere action being taken. In line of this security issue that is prevailing and, of course, is hampering Pakistan's own economic roadmap as well, what options do you think Pakistan is left with?
This has been a long-standing challenge. I remember when we were kids and in the 70s, 80s, late 70s, 80s, it was hard, and then even when there was civil war in Afghanistan, subsequently this challenge still stayed. We had the Taliban and then subsequently the TTP. And then, of course, when the ISAF forces were there in Afghanistan, even then the challenge did not abate. And after 18 years, they left, and this Taliban regime has taken over. And we expected that because the Taliban, they had always stated that Pakistan had been so kind to Afghanistan in terms of keeping millions of refugees, in terms of helping Afghanistan with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assistance in a lot of different ways, in terms of extending this facility of transit trade and so many other avenues. But the unfortunate element is that even in the last couple of years, what we have seen is that the terrorism emanating from Afghanistan, instead of diminishing, has actually enhanced. And now Pakistan has tried various channels for to combat this terrorism. Of course, in various avenues. First of all, the kinetic operations, which have been going on within Pakistan, and sometimes they have been carried on in Afghanistan as well. Then there is the economic leverage that we have in terms of the transit trade facility that we extend to Afghanistan, and in terms of the fact that in the whole world there have been times where even when there was Taliban 1.0 government in Afghanistan, it was just Pakistan which recognized the country in the entire world, along with Saudi Arabia and UAE, which had also recognized just because of Pakistan, because they would not have otherwise recognized. the point is, we have sort of, and they accept that Pakistan, whenever they have needed, Pakistan has stood with Afghanistan, with the people of Afghanistan, with whoever has been governing Kabul, because that has been also a long-standing policy that whoever is in control of Kabul will recognize them as a government in Afghanistan. Although we have not, de jure recognized this Taliban 2.0, but as we all know, we have, diplomatic engagement, because they are the de facto rulers there. So the thing is, we have tried the kinetic operations, we have tried the diplomatic channels, we have tried the economic leverage as well, and it hasn't worked. Then we tried the multilateral approach.
Yes.
There are multiple forums for that. There is the Moscow format. There was a meeting in November. Then there's the quadrilateral forum. Then the countries like Pakistan and China together, we impress upon Afghanistan and Afghan authorities the need to combat that terrorism. But unfortunately, it has not really worked to the extent. I remember that, the Afghan chargé was at IRS just a month ago, and we had sort of, we had discussions on that. We had a dialogue, and he, in fact, made some promises there as well. So it is, but I still believe that, we have to keep on working. We have to use all these channels that I've mentioned, but also we have to emphasize further on the regional approach. And we have been saying that even the foreign
Definitely. I'll come to the regional approach, but we'll definitely delve on that. But before that, I'd like to take comments from Dr. Jamil as well. Dr. Jamil, thank you for being part of the conversation. As we know, we've talked about the security situation, we've talked about Pakistan-Afghanistan ties a lot. And of course, Pakistan has also talked about the security issue with the Afghan authorities. We've repeatedly called upon them to take action, but we saw no sincere effort being taken on their side. What options, in your opinion, do you think Pakistan is left with at the moment?
Yes, only one word: engagement. Engagement and engagement. We should not lose hope. Afghanistan, Pakistan, we have a deep relations, people-to-people relations. They still have their families. The Afghan Taliban, they have, I would contribute some more points what Mr. Jauhar has just mentioned, that we have really been able to protect their interest at our platform, and also we have been taking care of them in our own country. So with all those what we have been doing in past, why all of a sudden they turn their face on to the other side? Why they are not being able to control the TTP, and why they're allowing the terrorist groups to intrude into Pakistan and carry out these operations? So there are 3-4 whys, and let's try and just diagnose that. One, that do the Afghan Taliban, they have the full structure to control them? Two, that have they totally delineated their affiliation with their brothers and their cousins who have fought shoulder to shoulder with Afghan Taliban against the Soviet Union? Answer is no. And thirdly, that if they take action against TTP, or for that matter, other groups, A, that they don't have the structure, B, that they don't have the resources, C, that they do not want to turn them against the Afghan governance system. And if they do that, probably they might be feeling that it's not done. Finally, that why are they, from their own core of heart, they are supporting Taliban to actually go and attack on the carry out operation in our territory in Pakistan? The answer is not very clear, but I would still doubt that Afghan Taliban would fully support that. The fact of the matter is that our Prime Minister yesterday, day before yesterday, he has once again said that Pakistan definitely wants to negotiate with the Afghan Taliban. Pakistan wants to get into dialogue, but obviously there are certain terms and conditions. Those terms and conditions not only spelled out by Pakistan, that has been enunciated in the agreement, that has been enunciated in the Security Council resolutions, which was passed in September when Taliban had taken over just in about 1 month's time. So
commitments made, but they were not being upheld.
That's right. That's not. They are not being upheld. Those commitments which they had made in the Doha Agreement with the United States, they have not upheld that also. And at the same time, one has to be fair that the United States, what commitments they made in the third part of that Doha Agreement, and I remember it. What was there in the third part of the Doha Agreement, that the United States would try and get them recognized. Afghanistan would also try and get the Doha Agreement ratified from the United Nations, and also all other supports in Part 3. The Part 2 of the Doha Agreement, Taliban did made a commitment that they would ensure that their territory is not being used for any terrorist purposes. And there are 20 terrorist groups, which is the report of the United Nations monitoring team, which has been submitted in the Security Council very recently. And they are not one, there are about three monitoring team of the United Nations report.
Definitely. Well, of course, there's a lot coming in, and of course, we know there's international criticism as well, but I'd like to include the comments from Brigadier Raashid Wali Janjua as well. And of course, when we talk about the security issue, of course, there's militant groups like the ISIS Khorasan. We know, of course, these are a threat to Pakistan as well, but when we talk about the organizations like ISIS Khorasan, they are a threat to even the Western powers. Because of their capabilities, the potential that this organization holds. We know they were involved in the Moscow attack as well and other subsequent attacks as well. When we talk about the security threat, of course, do you think and do you term this threat as not one of just regional or one that just concerns Pakistan, but that of a global nature? And do you think a concerted global effort should be made to curb this terrorism threat that is emanating from Afghan soil?
Thanks. Yes, I tend to agree that the veritable witch's brew in Afghanistan. Any terrorist entities competing for any, while one interim government looks askance. And it's a fact that Sufre doesn't rise twice. The facts projected by these, it's a real threat that is emerging. He is surprised to know that sons of Osama bin Laden was being escorted and being given a conducted tour by northern regions of is a clear.
We're having trouble connecting to you. We'll try to reconnect, as of course we're having audible issues, and as the issue gets resolved, we'll reconnect and of course pose the same question. Coming towards Mr. Jauhar Saleem, sir, when we talk about this issue, of course, as you've also mentioned, as Dr. Jamil also mentioned, it's that of a regional issue, and of course that even bigger than the region, it's a global issue. When we talk about curbing this issue, do you think there should be regional concerted efforts like that? We have an organization like the SCO in place. We have a security mechanism like the RATS in place. But do you think it should be made more effective to curb this threat, because it hampers, of course, the prospects of regional connectivity that China and all the global stakeholders are very keen on?
Yeah, there are several mechanisms available multilaterally. SCO is one. RATS, of course, the regional anti-terrorist structure that they have. But there are others. There are other mechanisms, like I mentioned, quadrilateral mechanism is there, Moscow format is there, and then there are certain formats where the US is part of the structure as well. Now the fact is that in Afghanistan, like I said, nothing has really worked. And Pakistan is the one country which has been at the forefront of this threat. We've had like over 100,000 deaths because of terrorism in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And we had economic losses of over $150 billion. No other country has been affected to that extent. Although other countries, they do face that, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's Iran, all these countries, even the West has faced this threat in the past. Now, it's not just Taliban, the TTP there. It's like, as has been mentioned, it's ISKP as well. But it's also Al-Qaeda is re-emerging in Afghanistan. And that is why we believe that the West needs to take cognizance of this, this enhancing threat emanating from there. And we need an approach where not just a regional approach, but a rather an international approach, because Afghanistan still craves for recognition. Afghanistan still needs a lot of economic assistance. Afghanistan cannot survive as a country, being cut off from the world. So they need all those linkages. So all those linkages are basically leverages as well, for not just for Pakistan and China and Russia and Iran, but also for the West. And West is still involved. There are the billions of dollars of Afghanistan, which the Americans still hold. So all that that leverage is there. I think it's a question of translating all that leverage that exists into some tangible sort of result. And for that we need to probably intensify the diplomacy that has been in place. Okay, and the fact is, like Jamil Saab said, yes, we do have to stay engaged with Afghanistan, and I would say not just politically engaged, we still have to stay engaged economically as well. We have to stay engaged in terms of people-to-people contacts, culturally as well. Because you see, the linkages between Pakistan and Afghanistan, they're not just historical linkages, they're not just cultural linkages, they're not just economic linkages, not civilizational linkages. They're also linkages in terms of the shared future. Because if this region has to, has to become more developed, it needs that connectivity. Definitely. And the vision of connectivity with Pakistan has, that is something which is essential for Afghanistan as well. Afghanistan could be the linchpin for that connectivity.
Mr. Jauhar Saleem, sorry to cut you here, but of course a thought came in mind. Sure. When we talk about the Afghan Taliban regime, of course they have faced international criticism over their governance issues. There's international criticism regarding women's rights, children's rights, a right to education, a right to work, and of course a right to live as the people want to. When we talk about all these criticisms that the Taliban regime faces, and I'm posing this question because you're running short on time as well. When we talk about all this international criticism that the Taliban regime faces, and of course the security threat and how Pakistan has repeatedly called upon them, how the region has called upon this and talked about this over and over, do you think it would be a win-win for Pakistan, for Afghanistan's side, if they cooperate with Pakistan in, of course, curbing this security issue, which will in turn give a better image of the Taliban's governance in Afghanistan domestically?
Definitely. We have to remember that the Taliban, it's not that they are not facing this threat. Recently there was a minister in Afghanistan, yes, who died in a terrorist bomb attack. And there have been multiple terrorist attacks there as well. This is a threat that is common to both the countries. Afghanistan has faced this for for decades and decades, and so has Pakistan. And you see, and what does Afghanistan need right now? What they need is more stability. They need more security. They need very simply, they need more human development. They need more economic development. They need more trade. They need more assistance. They need more the technological collaboration.
So uplift of
so for all these things, what do they need? They cannot, like I said, they cannot stay and survive in a meaningful way, cut off from the world. And if they have to engage with the world meaningfully, the most important country for them to engage with in the entire world, because of the historical reasons, because of the geographical reasons, because of the reasons, economic reasons, because of the security reasons, is actually Pakistan. So I think this is something that they need to understand, And but sometimes, there are certain analysts who say the problem is that within the Taliban, that there are ideological sorts of issues as well. That of course Taliban is not really a very homogeneous group as such, and those contradictions sometimes become evident in terms of their policy as
Definitely.
well. But I think having said all that, and in view of all that, it is very important that we stay engaged with them bilaterally, one, but also we focus on the regional and the international collective approach.
Definitely, of course, moving towards Brigadier Raashid Janjua, but before that, Mr. Jauhar Saleem, President of the IRS and former Foreign Secretary, thank you for being part of the conversation. Brigadier Raashid, thank you for joining us again. We have you on phone line. Of course, as we talk about the security situation and we talk about regional efforts, you were also mentioning how the security threat is not one that just affects Pakistan, but that affects the region and the world at large as well. We have Jauhar Saleem with us, we had Dr. Jamil, who both mentioned that, of course, this needs a regional concerted effort. How would you comment on that? And, of course, the options that Pakistan is left with regards to its engagement with the Taliban regime. And, of course, how can these engagements be further heightened and, of course, emphasized upon with regards to resolving this issue?
You see, it's a no-brainer that positive engagement with the Afghan interim government should continue, because we can't change our neighborhood. And despite that, there are certain realities that we need to take cognizance of. And those realities are that there is a trinity of ideology, confusion, and fear in Afghanistan. Afghan interim government is beset with internal cleavages. There is a confusion. There is a split between Kandhari faction and Haqqani faction. Both don't see eye to eye on several issues, and TTP is one of those issues. Despite a clear edict by Mullah Hibtullah Akhundzada, who is spiritual and temporal head of Afghanistan, that any attack on Pakistan, armed forces or civilians is haram. They have not interpreted and they have not abated those attacks. And there is a Haqqani faction which is giving complete support and bases in Khost and Paktika provinces, where an attack was also conducted by Pakistan in Barmal area. That is a consequence of a continual, attacks and complete impunity to those who are operating from those secure bases, training the suicide bombers. And Pakistan attacked a suicide bomber base, essentially, which was training the suicide bombers across the border. And it is our right to take all those measures if the Afghan interim government does not stop the depredations of TTP. Now, this split has to be taken cognizance of. Then is the ideological factor. Those TTP elements, which according to a UN source range within 6,000 to 6,500 in Afghanistan. Now, those fought with the Afghan interim government against the US and ISAF forces. But then hospitality also has a limit. The rivaj of Pakhtun, as per the Pakhtun Wali, the Nanavati clause, which is the hospitality, it does not mean that we give hospitality and you attack a neighboring country and imperil the security of our own country. This is for Afghan interim government to now realize. And I believe that this TTP is rapidly becoming a liability for Afghan interim government. And they are also now concerned about how to go about reining them. The problem is...
Brigadier Raashid, as you talked about that the Taliban regime should realize, of course, Mr. Jauhar Saleem also mentioned that it is a win-win for the Afghan side because they face international criticism on their governance, how they're handling the issue of terrorism that is emanating from their soil. But despite that, we see that the Taliban regime has made no sincere effort with regards to Pakistan's concerns. Even despite that, when we talk about, of course, this issue, we know there's also regional spoilers of peace. We know there's incidents in the past like that of Mubarak Hussain Patel. Of course, when we talk about the Taliban regime, it is a win for them to cooperate with Pakistan. But do you think there's other spoilers of peace in the region that are exploiting the Afghan situation? And of course, do you think there should be a regional mechanism or a global mechanism in place to, of course, inquire into these spoilers of peace to hold them accountable?
Yes, of course, a regional solution is a must for this. China and Russia, both are important stakeholders in peace, and so are the Central Asian neighbors, including Iran. All those countries must be taken on board to impress upon Afghan interim government to rein in these elements. And there are about a dozen terrorist entities, including ETIM, IMU, who are actively involved besides ISKP. And those are a clear and present danger to Afghanistan and the region beyond, and the whole world now, because their aims and their reach is not circumscribed by some specific region, especially ISKP ideology. It is global. So it's a global threat now, and there are beyond the regional countries. I think countries like United States should also take notice of this thing, because I believe that because of several linkages and competing interests, there are regional countries which are thinking of Afghanistan as a kind of a leverage to settle scores. There are countries like India which are supporting TTP clearly to get even with Pakistan and to bleed Pakistan, but that is a very short-sighted and myopic approach, and they are creating a Frankenstein's monster, frankly, which might bite the same hand that feeds them. And this realization has to emerge from within a consensus amongst the regional countries as well as the global entity, that the festering sore of terrorism that Afghanistan is becoming might create a bigger specter of terrorism than was experienced in the shape of 9/11. And this is for the international community, which is still engaged in some way, because the United States has some influence. They are still giving $30 to $40 million of humanitarian aid every week to Afghan interim government to keep them humanitarian.
Definitely, that's a very pragmatic approach that you highlighted, Brigadier Raashid, and I'd like you to stay with us as we move in the conversation. I'd like to include comments from Dr. Jamil as well. So, as we talk about a regional approach to, of course, this issue, we also talked about, as Brigadier Raashid had to say, there should be a regional mechanism in place to hold those spoilers of peace accountable. And of course, I'd like your comment on it being a resolving of this security issue, being a win-win for the Afghanistan side, as of course giving a response to the international criticism that they have been facing, and of course curbing their governance domestically.
Not only international criticism which they have been facing, but they are also facing the problem of violating their own agreement which they have done, that is in shape of the agreement which I was mentioning a little while ago. And that was further augmented by the Security Council resolution, in which again the entire world has desired that the Taliban should not allow their soil to be used for any other country in terms of terrorism and so on. But then one thing which I was mentioning, and I'll dilate upon it a little more, and that is basically the structure of the Taliban. That I would still not raise that much doubt in their sincerity. I would have my doubt about their capability. So their capability is not as much as we expect from, as the world expects from them. Spoilers are really taking advantage of it. What you said, the regional spoilers have maximum allocation of budget for this particular purpose to spoil it, and serves the two purposes to that regional spoiler what you are indicating. And their one purpose is that they are trying to achieve their bilateral goal, bilateral benefits, and the other one is another benefit which is they are aligned. The regional spoiler are also aligned for the containment of China. And if Afghanistan remain unstable, and it would remain unstable because there's still about 75% people, they are dependent on the foreign aid. And if the humanitarian aid is not given, and if it was 1.2 billion, which donors initially doled out the money for the humanitarian work, and those donors are mostly Scandinavian countries, WFP. All those efforts are going, but still Afghanistan needs stability, and it's in the interest of the regional countries, it's in the interest of the global community. And why it's in the interest of the global community? Because these 20 terrorist group, which has been mentioned in the report of the monitoring team of the United Nations Security Council, those groups can expand. Those groups can really be very harmful for the entire global peace. So that is where the United States and other countries are worried. But at the same time, there are powers, the world powers, that are interested in the containment of China. And those containment of China becomes much more easier if Pakistan keeps facing such threats of the terrorism from TTP or any other corner. And then because of it, see what has happened at the Karachi airport and the way Chinese were targeted and all those things. We cannot really discuss such the topics in isolation. It leads us to the global geopolitical landscape and the dynamics of the global geopolitical landscape. And what I mentioned a little while ago about the competition between two very important and very powerful countries. That is one part. But we are concerned about our own country, and as we were mentioning, that there has to be some reason.
Definitely, of course, and Dr. Jamil, when you talked about, of course, how there should be international, there is international concern regarding this issue, and of course, when we talk about the Afghan people's their own uplift, do you think a resolution of this problem could be, as they say, when you educate a woman, you don't just educate one individual, you educate a whole family? Do you think human resource development for the Afghan people could help resolving these issues? And by human resource development, I mean collaboration by all the international stakeholders.
One of the patrons of an organization which is running a telemedicine and some of the humanitarian work. Yesterday, I met the Deputy Minister of the Education, and I raised this question, what you were asking me. And they said there is a lot of improvement now. We have the awakening and we are allowing our women to, but not in a co-education, but otherwise we have open colleges and all. This what was only yesterday that Minister was claiming. And also, I just had some questions because I know that I was also quite curious about it, like many other countrymen, men and women. So I asked him. I said, well, basically, how do the Afghani people they feel about a stronger country, which is Pakistan, a country which has its strength in the entire countries of the OIC. He said that we definitely rely on the strength of Pakistan, but at the same time there are groups within the groups. The TTP is one thing which neither they can align with it, nor they can totally alienate themselves from the TTP. And I'd given some arguments.
Definitely. I'd like to include comments from Brigadier Raashid, Wali, Janjua as well, sir. When we talk about, of course, this curbing this issue, a resolution of this issue, do you think human resource development for the Afghan people, uplifting the human standards, the human life standards of the Afghan people, could in turn, of course, help in resolution of this issue? It is a policy that will not have short-term effect, but do you think the international stakeholders should also keep this in line when they talk about the Afghan policy?
You see, that is a second order thing. The first and the prime issue here is now the security situation. All these things of human resource development and subsequent infrastructure development, those are secondary things which come later. Already Pakistan is helping a lot by way of extending educational opportunities. There are Afghan girls which are getting educated in our universities. Pakistan's government has given scholarships to those, and it has given scholarships to male as well as female students. Besides that, there's some training that is being offered to various other professions. So all those things, but remember that nothing can flow. Trade even cannot flow if the border situation is so volatile. How can you conduct trade? I mean, the best bet is Afghanistan should leverage its locational advantage for connectivity and earn transit fees if there is a peace on the borders. And if it closes the borders and there's a constant conflict-like situation on Pakistan-Afghanistan border, then how could the peace dividends be reaped by Afghan interim government? So that's not possible. I don't subscribe to this theory that human resource development will result in peace. In fact, for peace, there has to be a consensus amongst the various competing factions of Afghan interim government like Kandahari and Haqqanis that they should sink their differences. But at the moment, I think they are going the opposite way. And I fear a civil war-like situation because both the Kandahari faction and Haqqanis, they are now creating leverages. They are training their own militants. And the Kandahari faction, which was not big on militancy, has also started gathering a militant cadre out of the madrasas, and there are credible reports that around 40,000 of madrasa students are being recruited. Probably they are keeping their powder dry, and they are preparing for a situation once both factions go to a conflict. Then these elements like militant cadres would come in handy. So that's a very dangerous situation. And same is the case with TTP. Why they are not been able to rein them in is perhaps they are trying to woo TTP, especially the Haqqanis who have leverages and who have influence in North Waziristan, where their base is. They won't like to let go of their base and its recruitment human resource. So these are the very, very complicated dimensions that do not lend themselves to an easy answer. And it is for Afghan interim government, it is for the government itself to take cognizance of these things and try and stave off this dangerous scenario that is building, that Pakistan is now compelled to take the battle across the Pakistan frontier to target those bases where the Haqqanis are clearly supporting. So unless this thing is stopped by the Afghan interim government or through a regional solution by the countries which are directly impacted and whose economic and political stakes are impacted, these are the Central Asian states, that includes China, Russia, Iran also. So all those countries have a stake in peace, and the biggest stake is of Pakistan. So Afghan interim government is in a very difficult situation at the moment. There is a confusion, there is a fear, there are internal splits and conflicts. And in this scenario, Pakistan has to get its own, act together. We have to protect our borders. We have to ensure that we cleanse our territory of these militants and ensure at the same time that we keep our engagement diplomatic channels open with the Afghan interim government to continually impress upon them the need to rein in these elements, failing which we have a right to take the battle to the bases from where this terrorism is emanated against Pakistan.
We hope before that saner voices prevail on the Taliban side. Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, so far as the conversation has shaped up, I'd like your concluding remarks, and if you could keep it concise because we're also running short on time. Dr. Jamil, are you with us? Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, I think we have trouble connecting with him, but as we delved onto the security situation, as we delved into Pakistan and Afghanistan affairs, and as Brigadier Raashid Wali Janjua also highlighted, we hope saner voices prevail on the Afghan side and take heed of the conversation that we just had. Of course, it is in their own interest and it is in the interest of the Afghan people, of course, to have their rights, to have their standards of living be uplifted, to get their opportunities for progress and prosperity, which they cannot get without a stable and secure environment. It is an issue that not just affects Pakistan, that not just affects the region, but also affects the Afghan people. And this is something that the Taliban regime should take cognizance of because, of course, it's not just the region, regional countries, regional stakeholders, but Afghanistan itself that is, of course, in a series of self-inflicting damage as a result of this situation. And the Taliban regime needs to, of course, deal with all the militant groups that are being harbored on Afghan soil and are using the Afghan soil to, of course, destabilize the region at large. And this kind of instability comes at a time when there's so much effort for regional connectivity, when there's effort being put in for connectivity with the Central Asian state, and these landlocked countries being given access to warm waters through Pakistan and the Gwadar port that is now almost complete. And of course, with regards to that, we genuinely hope that the relevant quarters on the Afghan side take heed of what was all that said. I'd like to thank all of our guests, Mr. Jauhar Saleem, President of the IRS and former Foreign Secretary, who had joined us, Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan, Foreign Ambassador, and Brigadier Raashid Wali Janjua, who is Director of Research at IPRI and a Senior Analyst. Thank you all for your time and being part of the conversation. That's all that we had from the perspective of that today. See you same time next week. Till then, take care.